looking at the game yesterday, and I really don't care about baseball anymore. Not if the Giants aren't there, right? I'm from San Francisco. I root for the Giants. They're not in it. And I'm thinking, God, when I was all gung ho about the Giants and no one else was because they were living somewhere else, I must have been an absolute bore. But so I'm watching the Astros and I'm watching the Yankees, and this is going to determine the final participant in the World Series. And if the Astros win, they get in. If the Yanks somehow pull it out, then they extend the season. And I'm thinking, I kind of would like to see the Yankees because, Aaron Judge, he's like the symbol of California's Highway 99, right? The Central Valley, the land that the godforsaken part of California, the anti-Hollywood part of California. It's a place where it's not exactly the ne'er-do-wells of California, but it's not the cool, hip, this is what's happening part of the blue state, right? It's the red part of the blue state. And so I'm thinking, you got to have some pride in 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 Aaron Judge. And he wears 99 because it's Highway 99. So I'm thinking I could like the Yankees. And then my wife says, no, you can't like the Yankees because they're the capitalists. They spend all this money and it's all about money, money, money. And she said, yeah, right. I can't like, if I like a New York team, it has to be the Mets, and they're already out. The Mets, like they don't spend money. And then I thought, well, I could like the Astros because I wasn't born in Houston. Every time I lived in Houston or in Texas, they thought me, a Filipino with a Hispanic last name, they thought I was Mexican. So why would I like Houston? But Houston was a very important time in my life. I learned a lot about being me in Houston. It was my first really big radio job. It was where I was Emil for real. So maybe I can find it in me to root for the Astros because they've got one of the best short players, Jose Altuve, who's had a heck of a series, negatively. I mean, he wasn't hitting where the darn. But Jose, he's kind of like, you like all the short players. The short players who hit with power, the all-stars, Jose Altuve, yeah, I could get behind him. And then every time this is not the first time I wanted to embrace Jose Altuve. And it just didn't work. Didn't feel right. And then I thought, well, wait a minute. The Astros have Dusty Baker. And I love Dusty. He was with the Giants. He's married to a Filipina. He's got a half Filipino son. Darren, the kid who got swept off from behind home plate by JT Snow when, during a game, he was a bat boy, a young kid. Yeah, I can get behind Dusty. I love Dusty. He's a good guy. But for some reason, yeah. And then I just decided, no, I can't. Someone mentions, oh, yeah, you're going to get behind the Astros. They cheated. They banged on trash cans. They were stealing signals. You're going to get behind that team. I'm telling you, it's tough this year. But there it was, the last out, bottom of the ninth, Aaron Judge, 2 outs, hits a meek, he's the home run king, hits a meek little grounder to the second baseman. It's all over to the first base, or to the pitcher. Back to the box. It's all over. Yankees lose. Yankees lose. Yankees lose. To paraphrase John Sterling. And you know what? So be it. So be it. I mean, baseball season. The Astros are going to go up against the Phillies. The Phillies are good, but I don't know. After my tirade against the Astros here, can I get back to liking them? This is important now. When your football team loses and your basketball team is sort of erratic, and your team that you wanted to root for loses, you got to wonder, am I just preparing myself for November 8th? Am I going to mope around thinking that, oh, I'm just practicing to lose? Because that's where it seems to be going. And then I said, no, stop that thinking. We got to be optimistic. We got to be optimistic. And that's what I want to talk about, how to be optimistic today. We're going to motivate you to go out there, not just to vote, but we're going to motivate you to register to vote here on this edition of Emil Amok's Takeout, my takes on all things considerable, complete with talk show sound effects. Of course, we are going to motivate you to vote, because if you're in California, or maybe you are going to school outside of California, maybe 3,000 miles on the East Coast, and you've forgotten about your California roots. I did that when I was, going to school out east. But California is your home. It's home for a reason. You can still register to vote. Today is the deadline, October 24th. You can go online, actually. And if you go to my ALDEF website or my ALDEF column, aaldef.org/blog, there it is. Just click on the clickable there, which is at, let's see, I'm clicking on it now. It's at sos.ca.gov/elections, Secretary of State, right? www.sos.ca.gov/elections, and find out all you need to do about voting and registering today. The last day, today, you could do it online. And you can, and even if you don't get it today online, they're still allowing you a way to register. You just simply become a provisional ballot. They'll ultimately count it, but you will be counted. But I just want you to know that just because your team or teams lost over the weekend, now I know in New York, people in New York are happy because their football teams are winning finally. But if you're in San Francisco, you think, oh, God, what happened to the 49ers? So, look, if your team's lost this weekend, don't go around moping like you're preparing for a dismal November 8th, like losing is going to be your thing. No. Races are close. There's still hope. Everything is winnable. Everyone just has to register and vote. And don't you know, voting has already begun by mail and in person. As I like to say, vote early and once, just once. You can only vote just once. And just vote. And if you didn't register yet, believe me, it's not too late. Go to my go to the column at aldef.org/blog, click on the link there, vote online. If you're in California, you can vote. If you miss the deadline, you get the provisional ballot. You'll still count. Don't miss the boat. You got to vote. Don't miss the boat. Now, if you're from any other state, now this is key. Call your Secretary of State's office, and then this will be a reminder about the struggle we have in democracy, because any restrictions that you encounter will let you know how much a certain party doesn't want you to vote and how it's doing all it can to prevent your vote. And if you still manage to be able to vote, what they'll do in redistricting to diminish or devalue your vote. I mean, that's all there. As you see how restrictive it is if you don't live in California. So check it out. I hope you live in California. I hope you're one of the Asian Americans. This is the micro talk show of Asian Americans, although you don't have to be one. But if you're an Asian American in California, the most Asian American state, you'll see why a lot of us are reluctant to leave California. Because they got people in power who are Asian American. They got people in the high offices who are Asian American. It's sort of like Hawaii, only connected more with the rest of the country. Oh, Hawaii's beautiful too. I lived there. I lived there for 2 years. But, I mean, there's this feeling you get in Hawaii where you think, I got to go back to the country just for a day or so, just to reacclimate. No, you are in the country. You're in Hawaii. Oh, yeah. No, Hawaii's beautiful. Love Hawaii. But some people realize how reluctant they are to leave California when they see, oh my God, look at what we take for granted in California. You don't get that if you're in Iowa. You don't get that if you're in Minnesota or Nebraska. You don't get that same kind of diversity. You don't get that same kind of open arms kind of embrace that, hey, you're Asian American. Anyway, so first things, register. And if you're registered, got your ballot, I've got my ballot, why wait? Just pop it in the mail. Asian Americans love to vote by mail. Here's your chance. Go ahead and do it. Start doing it now. You can only vote once. Make it happen. But I'm telling you, you can deal with all the things that are going to happen between now and the next 14 days when things go up and down. Look, you're firm. You know who you're going to vote for. Just vote. Pull the trigger. Vote. Now, some people may need a little motivation. It's hard to believe that, though. But because these midterm elections have become more consequential than even the last presidential election. You know, the one that some Republicans insist was stolen, but wasn't. Here's the problem. If the election deniers ride the big lie to victory, as hard as these last 2 years have been, you can expect things to get even harder and nastier if the deniers possibly are in the majority in both houses of Congress. I mean, you say, it can't get any tougher than it is now. I mean, where every victory is like a half victory because there's like obstacles at every turn. Well, yeah, and the Democrats are in charge, but they don't have an overwhelming mandate. And if they lose the majority in even one of those houses, democracy will feel worse than ever because it will seem like barely a democracy. And that's what happens when you have election deniers out there running, because it really is democracy denial, which sounds even worse than election denial. So surely, as an Asian American, you don't need more motivation to vote, right? I mean, because it's already gotten personal, right? Are you a dreamer? Are you a recipient of a deferred action for childhood arrivals? Are you in that program? Do you know someone who is? Now, a few weeks ago, the Fifth Circuit Appeals Court declared DACA illegal. Now, it still has a ways to be finalized in terms of what does that mean. Ultimately, the decision on establishing a pathway to citizenship and, the full-blown acceptance of DACA relies on Congress. What's that mean? That means you got to get people who love you or people who are family members who can vote. You got to give them all the vote. You got to get them, if they're in California, get them to the Secretary of State's website and register tonight by midnight. You got to tell your friends to go out there and register. If you're in another state, you got to find out how they can, if they've missed the deadline, how they can become provisional voters and cast a ballot. Because it all relies on Congress. And you can decide who goes to Congress before they decide who they want to deport. That's the power of your vote. Now, are you another kind of dreamer? The kind looking at a college degree as your ticket to opportunity? Remember, you stretched, you got into a pricier school. You didn't go to a city that and such or state this and such. You went to that pricier private school. You got that student loan. And you got your parents to get a loan. Yeah, because they had parents' loans. The more the merrier. Everyone's making money except you because you got to pay back that student loan. But with the loan, you could better afford that $70,000 a year tuition. So just last week, it was Friday. We just finished our show talking about Joe Biden, right? Who was just talking up the program. Yeah, it's a great program. Everyone is signing up. And then at the last minute on Friday, the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Eighth Circuit, acting on an appeal from 6 Republican attorneys general from southern states like Arkansas, Missouri, they blocked President Biden's student loan forgiveness plan. This is called student loan forgiveness denial. This is where up to $20,000 in debt relief could come your way if you make under $125,000 a year. Your adjusted gross. And like I said, we're not talking about just students. We're talking about some parents, some of whom added maybe $30,000 of debt for their kids, which could be about $400 a month in payments. A relief plan would have made a difference until Republicans decided to deny you any relief. Can you imagine that? $400 in payments. You can get up to $20,000 wiped out. $400, that could go. I mean, in these kind of economic times where you're talking about inflation, you're talking about less food in the shopping cart. You're spending more money. You're getting less stuff on your supermarket trips. I'm telling you, you want the inflationary, an approach to fighting inflation. Just go vegan. All the biggest things that have gone up: food costs, meat costs, dairy, eggs. Cut all that out. Go vegan. You'll save like 20%. You don't have to buy that expensive fake meat stuff. Vegetables. I'm telling you, it works. Anyway, student loan forgiveness denial. It's the big thing amongst Republicans now. Here's the thing. You could still apply. They've stopped it by the courts. The courts have made the issue a political football. But like I said, Biden was talking about the virtues of the relief plan on Friday before the courts halted it briefly. It's a brief halt. We don't know how long, but it's temporary. I mean, the application process for this was so easy. It was easier to apply for loan forgiveness than it was to fill out a FAFSA form. You people who have filled out FAFSA forms, you know how difficult that is. Filing for forgiveness, easy. Nearly 10 million people did it. Mostly middle-class Americans already signed up as of Friday. So you say the Republicans must not want their votes, right? Well, I guess not. But they do want the corporate high-income voters. And get this, here's a twist. They also want the extreme lower end, the ultra-rich and the ultra-poor. And this really is the GOP argument, that the middle-class relief that Biden is pushing is unfair because it only helps middle class, which is kind of stupid to criticize it that way because, of course it helps the middle class only. It was intended to help the middle class, not lower income folks who normally don't go to college. But that's the GOP argument. They said, well, you're not helping the lower income people who don't go to college and also vote Republican. You should think of that as folks described in the polls as non-college educated, mostly whites. In other words, the Trump base. So, slashing the student loan forgiveness plan, it's part and parcel with the nonsensical general Republican plan to address the economy and inflation. What is that plan? Well, to cut overall spending and cut taxes. Wait a minute. To cut taxes? Economists would consider that inflationary. And that's a GOP go-to? It's also yet another variation of the debunked trickle-down theory where you enrich the corporates with their industry and their job, so-called job creation, and the benefits will trickle down to everyone else. But it never does. Now, Biden countered all that by unveiling a slogan last week calling the GOP plan the MAGA Mega Trickle Down. The MAGA Mega Trickle Down. I bet you he thinks he's really clever. I mean, it's not a bad slogan, and it might catch. But I prefer referring to student loan forgiveness as good old trickle up economics. That's what we need, not trickle down economics. We need trickle up economics. Because $20,000 in debt relief, that's like if everyone you know with $20,000 in credit card debt had it wiped out, just like that, gone. That would suddenly put in people's pockets everywhere. Like I said, $300, $400 a month. Let them spend that on goods and services. And let that trickle up the corporate economy. I mean, trickle up, I trust that. You give me a tax cut, I'll trickle it up. I'm going to spend it. Trickle down? I don't know. I think they'll spend on the CEOs and they'll spend on other things. It's not going to trickle down to you and me. Let's face it, debt relief from Biden's student loan forgiveness can be life-changing. You don't need to hit the lottery to feel the difference. And it's not like bailing out a bank or a corporate giant or an auto manufacturer, like both parties have done. Student loan forgiveness is like a little mini bailout for regular folks. And if it matters to you, then you've got to vote. You've got to be motivated. Register while you can. Get your invite to Election Day when your voice in our democracy can trickle up. This is the thing. They've already attacked us through DACA by just standing in the way of DACA. Political football, you can still hope that people extend, but it's going to be up to Congress. And then here's student loan forgiveness. You can still apply, but when and if the relief comes, will be up to Congress, if not the courts first. The only thing you can do is really trickle up, right? Vote, let your voice trickle up. So that's my column today on the ALDEF blog, aaldef.org/blog. I talked about Houston. I talked about, today is Diwali. Happy Diwali. And also we got Britain on the verge of having a person of color in charge. What a Diwali gift, right? I mean, I think it's cool. Rishi Sunak, right? I mean, he hasn't yet, but he's about to, they're saying he's going to become Britain's prime minister tomorrow. The former finance minister of the Exchequer, set to become the first person of color to lead Britain. This is a big deal. It's a big deal because it's a person of color. It may not be a big deal because he's a person of color in the image of the colonizer, in the image of the imperializer. It is the true brown face or the true white face on the brown face. And it's one of the reasons why he didn't get it the first go round. You remember they chose Liz Truss. And then there was another woman when Liz Truss was repelled, when she was said, no, you're not, no one likes you. They had another woman they were going to put up, and then she didn't make it. And then they were going to bring back Boris Johnson. The guy with the hair, that guy. And he, as of this morning, said, no, by default, they had Rishi Sunak. No one wants to do this job. Rishi Sunak didn't get it the first time because it was seen that he was too elitist. Too elitist. Here's a guy born of Indian immigrants to England. And he gets all the great benefits. The elite schools, he gets to go to Stanford, as well as the finest schools in England. I believe he went to Oxford. Here's the thing about Rishi Sunak that I was reading when he was considered, because I saw him, I said, oh, he's a person of color. He's Hindu. He's Indian. This is going to be a thing. I mean, this is a moment. This is a great Diwali gift. This is a great source of light in the Festival of Lights. He's conservative, but it's a person of color. But he didn't make it the first go round because people thought he was too elitist. The white conservatives thought he was too elitist. Finally, they said, well, he's got 100 legislators, 100 members of the parliament there, lawmakers to back him up. He can't be denied. And finally, reluctantly, now he's all set to be Britain's first person of color to lead the country. And I mean, look, they had the first woman, right? Maggie Thatcher. The U.S. hasn't had one. I mean, Kamala Harris, first female vice president. But there's no one like Maggie Thatcher. And now we have a person of color. This is like, all right, we're Asian Americans. I mean, I call this the micro talk show of Asian America. Where is the next Asian American president coming from? Oh, well, wait a minute. There are none. We haven't had an Asian American. All right. How about we don't have a Filipino American in Congress. We had one at half, TJ Cobb. And the other, we do have one in Congress, Bobby Scott, African American and Filipino. I mean, this is why I'm excited about Rob Bonta. He's playing the political game as AG in California. And politicians have a long tail career. Something good may ultimately happen to Rob Bonta. But in Great Britain, Rishi Sunak becomes the guy, and he's in their image. That's why I was kind of surprised that there was a reluctance at first to back him. But I'm glad they're backing him. It's a little unfortunate that he's not really that much different from conservative whites. But maybe he will bring a different sensibility. Not just one that is conservative, but one that is, say, mindful about people who are often too often othered, too often on the fringe. Maybe. I mean, you try to say that about people of color here in the United States. Let's see, would that apply to Clarence Thomas? Let's see, would that apply to former cabinet official in the Trump administration, Ben Carson, or, Nikki Haley? I don't know. Politics. People have their politics, people have their values. We'll see just how conservative Rishi Sunak is. But at least on the surface, you got to applaud. This is a great thing to be the first person of color to lead what is seen as the whitest of white countries around, right? I mean, British white defines whiteness. And you got a person of color leading Great Britain. That's something. You'll remember Rishi Sunak. And you'll remember they tried to stop him, but ultimately he couldn't be denied. So tomorrow will be Rishi Sunak's day. Gets announced today on Diwali, Festival of Lights. Maybe it shows. The world is changing. Like you start to see movies from Hollywood, TV shows with people of color, more blacks, more Asians. Maybe that means, we'll start seeing, leaders of the country, they're also people of color. Maybe it'll, showbiz for ugly people, politics, there they are. But maybe it's just superficial. If they still act like white conservatives. I mentioned this the other day. Look for the Anime Wong quarters. 3 million Anime Wong quarters are being put, I don't know if they're all at once to be put in circulation. Just in case someone has a mad run on anime quarters, because not anime, Anna, middle name May, last name Wong. She was the Chinese American actress from the 30s. And here's the thing about Anime Wong. She was all set to be in Pearl Buck's The Great Earth. They were going to cast her, but in the end, they wouldn't cast her because she was too Asian. They would rather put someone in yellow face. So she gets honored today with her own quarter, which is good because 50-cent pieces, you'd hoard them. Dollar piece, if she was on a dollar, you'd hoard them. A quarter, spend the quarter. There's 300 million of them. That's how many they're going to put in circulation. And I wonder, she'll probably replace George Washington. See, I don't even carry any coins anymore. The last coin I had in a pair of pants I had just the other day, Washington, that's an old one. But I look for the Anime Wong, not anime like, Yu-Gi-Oh. Is Yu-Gi-Oh anime? Anna May Wong. A quarter coming to your pocket soon. So we talked about Rishi. That's the news, right? Rishi's in the news. Power to him. Some other things in the news today. We have, this came over as a flash. Justice Alito assured Ted Kennedy in 2005 of respect for Roe and Wade, according to a diary. And yet, Alito's a guy who sort of like opened up the gates to overturn Roe. And what does this tell you? It tells you that the Supreme Court is a political thing, and that Supreme Court justices, or people who want to be Supreme Court justices, will lie to get what they want. They're venal, they're human, and they're political. And we need something to try to reform this. Otherwise, I just don't know what I don't know about the future of this country. You know, we have this idea of checks and balances. No one has lifetime appointments. Not the executive branch, not the legislative branch. But these guys did in the Supreme Court. So I just remember reading that. And this is Alito. Yeah, maybe people change. In 2005, 17 years ago, he wrote this in his diary, telling Ted Kennedy, assuring Ted Kennedy of respect for Roe v. Wade. And now here he is leading the charge to reverse Roe. This is why it's important. I mean, it's important for you to vote. It's important for you to get out there, to register first. Today's the last day of registration. But I would be much more comfortable about the coming election if I knew that more of us are registered. If I knew that we're not going to get every last one. Today's the deadline in California. The 24th, October 24th. Call your Secretary of State if you're not from California. You got to register to vote. So, New York Times had an interesting story today. The headline is most interesting. Under the kind of democracy challenged, headline is, "Their America is vanishing. Like Trump, they insist they were cheated." Subhead, "The white majority is fading, the economy is changing, and there's a pervasive sense of loss in districts where Republicans fought the outcome of the 2020 election." And so these guys go to, the New York Times reporters go to Texas, Fort Bend County. And here is the nut. A shrinking white share of the population is a hallmark of the congressional districts held by the House Republicans who voted to challenge Mr. Trump's defeat. A New York Times analysis found a pattern political scientists say shows how white fear of losing status shaped the movement to keep him in power. The portion of white residents dropped about 35% more 35% more over the last 3 decades in those districts that in territory represented by other Republicans, the analysis found. And constituents also lagged behind in income and education. Oh, that's why they don't care about student loan forgiveness, because they didn't go to college. Rates of so-called deaths of despair, such as suicide, drug overdose, and alcohol-related liver failure, were notably higher as well. God, I don't want you to kill yourself, Republicans. But the fact that you are shows that you've got some problems. Shows that maybe you need to see a psychiatrist or something. You don't need to wreck democracy for the rest of us. This is a pretty startling analysis, but it shows that whites on the run are feeling the pressure. And we knew this, right? From the census to, dwindling white numbers to everything else. I mean, Make America Great Again. People said, oh, that's code for Make America White Again. These are people nostalgic for the way it used to be. And I'll tell you, They want things to go back to the 30s and 40s, not to the 60s. You go back to the 60s, that's when they got your voting rights and civil rights, and that's when they had the immigrants come in through the Immigration Act. So you got to go back to the 50s and maybe the 40s. Yeah, the 40s. Oh, too liberal still. You got to go back to the 30s. That's where things are at now. That's where things. Here's a quote from this article. Don Demmel, a 61-year-old salesman who turned out last month to pick up a signed copy of a book by, talking about this guy, Mr. Nels, who's a representative of Texas, the book is about a supposedly stolen election, said his parents had raised him colorblind. See, that's a new thing. They all want to be colorblind. Talk about race. Oh, it's all about race. They want to be colorblind. But the reason for the discontent was clear. Other white people in Fort Bend did not like certain people coming here, he said. It's race. They are old school. And that's what it's all about. It's white fear, folks. I'm not saying that the New York Times story here I'm reading, published today, is like gospel, but it's an example going to Fort Bend County in Texas, and an example, anecdote backed by analysis from political scientists saying or showing that white fear, that's what's driving things. And it's not just driving things in terms of election denial and student loan denial, which we talked about at the top of the show. It's also talking about how these people are lagging behind in income and education, and that the rates of suicide and drug overdose and liver failure all higher. We got some screwed up white people in America. We got to help them. I want to help you. I'm just saying, this story reveals the pathology. The pathology is real. White people are coming apart. And I, for one, want to help white people not restore their greatness, but just become nicer people. How about that? I want to lead white people in a meditation to help them deal with the change. Deal with the change in life. Because clearly they're having troubles. They're picking the wrong people to be candidates. It's just bad. It's a bad look for America. It's a bad look for white people. White people, I'm here to help. Hey, today is a special day. I don't know if you know this, but it's United Nations Day. The 24th of October is United Nations Day, and it's when Filipino Carlos P. Romulo was elected the first Secretary General of the UN in 1947 in San Francisco. And here's the thing about Carlos Romulo. How many people even know Carlos Romulo? I mean, you've got to be of a certain age, or a student of UN history, a student of history. Carlos Romulo was, and he was, if you wanted to find, I know some Filipinos listen, he was a Renaissance man. And he was a great man. And, Juanita Salai Wilson says, who remembers Carlos Romulo? Juanita says, I do. Well, you're a rare one. Today was a day he was elected president, or he was elected Secretary General of the UN. And I just remember when he was on the downward side of life, he was retired, but he was seen as the statesman that he was. And so I'd always be at things where he was like revered, right? I never really got to talk to him, but I did get a sense of what a nice, gentle, pleasant man he was. And I remember I was going to do a story, not a story, I was going to do a show on Filipino history, and a white woman, older than me, said, "You've got to talk about Carlos Romulo." And I said, "See, I was just a little. I knew who he was, but I was just a little removed from him." And I thought, no, I was thinking about talking about, the Filipinos from 1934 who went to the world's, or 1904 rather, who went to the World's Fair, or the Filipinos from 1587, or historical figures in Filipino American history will not forget Carlos Romulo. And just that feat of being from the Philippines and being elected the first UN Secretary General in San Francisco on UN Day. This the 24th, UN Day. 3 cheers, Carlos Romulo. Tomorrow, I'm going to talk more about Filipino American history. It's Filipino American History Month. Just a perception I have, a feeling I have about how things are changed. And now people are talking about 1587. And I think it's time that we got to really focus in on 1587, Emil. Yeah, listen to my last couple shows. Google, let's see. If you Google Emil Guillermo and 1587, Emil Guillermo 1587, you'll see a number of my columns I've written about the first Filipinos to arrive. Of course, you remember October 18th was the day, 1587. We talked about it the other day. I won't get into it right now, but I think what hit me was something about how we're celebrating the day. And then someone sent me something I wrote, believe it or not, 27 years ago. I wrote a column 27 years ago. Sent it back to me. Said, "Emil, you wrote this in 1995, and here you mentioned 1587. The significance of that we'll talk about tomorrow. All right. When we come back, we're here Monday through Friday. Emil Amok's Takeout. Me and my talk show sound effects. Can't afford a band, but I can afford talk show sound effects. And so we're here Monday through Friday, 2 p.m. Pacific, talking about all things considerable, the things that impact us as Asian Americans, as Filipino Americans. I thank you for being here live at 2 p.m. Pacific, sometimes a little sooner because, crank the thing up and just start going. And then usually we finish up within the hour. It just depends on how long-winded I get. I'm trying to be short-winded, but you can catch us live at Emil Amok on Twitter, at Emil Amok, on Facebook at emilguillermo.media, or Facebook Watch or Facebook Live. Or if you're on Facebook, you can chat. And when I said, "Hey, does anyone know Carlos Romulo?" and Juanita Salai Wilson said he came to Watsonville a few times. Now there's a guy. I mean, if he's in San Francisco, you better go to Watsonville and check out the Filipinos there. But that's one of the things. If you if you're on Facebook, you can chat at me, and we can make this interactive. So Twitter at Emil Amok, Facebook, fb.com, facebook.com/emilguillermo.media. Also on my YouTube channel, my pathetic, subscribe, please. I mean, subscribe, like us, do whatever the algorithm says, because we're slaves to the algorithm. Also, replays on amok.com. amok.com. So, regular listeners of the show know that I like a little meditation. Nothing like a little meditation, a little quiet to make sure your feelings and your needs are all aligned and you don't get out of whack and overreact, some kind of anger, some kind of irrational way, that we connect these feelings and our needs. And I find that, for me, it's always been just slowing down a bit and doing a little meditation. And the meditation that has always intrigued me from day one has been the loving kindness meditation, the meditation where you can get over or overcome your feelings of shame, feelings of you don't belong, feelings of inadequacy, feelings of, all those feelings that say, yeah, I'm an imposter. But we're not imposters. Not if you choose to provide some loving self-kindness, some self-care. Sometimes that's all it takes. So, think about that. Think about it by first offering it to people you know. Envision somewhere in that mental screen someone that you love. And then do a little screen wipe and picture someone you hate. And then screen wipe it back to someone you love and someone you hate and someone you love and someone you hate. And then find that spot where suddenly you realize there's really no difference between the two. That you really want to show love to all. And by doing so, something happens. The love comes back. And that's an example of a little loving self-kindness in 2 minutes or less. So, as I wish for me, I wish for you. May you be safe. May you be happy. May you be healthy. And may you live with ease. Emil Guillermo here. Back in tomorrow, 2 p.m. Pacific. We'll be live. This is show 417. Check out all the others on amok.com. Till then, next time. Mahal